Hi everybody, this is Shane R. Monroe. I'm the developer of the CJM configuration file tool that will allow you to create custom configurations which include keyboard mapping to controller buttons for the Commodore 64 Mini classic console and the Commodore 64 Maxi classic console. You used to have to do these by hand using text files. In some cases you can use a file name, right? So you can add some characters at the end of the file name that'll denote use port 1 or use PAL, use NTSC or whatever. And you can still do that, but the configuration files let you do something a little more unique, which is to assign keyboard strokes to various buttons on the Commodore controller, right? So the Commodore 64 used a standard 8-direction controller and one fire button, right? So we have another fire button, we have two little caret buttons here. I call them carets or triangles. And then 3 of these 4 buttons at the bottom, so let me see that there, 3 of the 4 buttons at the bottom can be programmed as well. So between, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6 buttons, you can do quite a few things. And one of the more common uses for this, since most games only use like maybe the space bar to throw grenades in Commando, for example, or F7 opens up a hangar bay door, I think in Raid Over Moscow, you do need some characters to type in. For example, Y or N for yes and no inside of a trainer screen, or space and run stop to get you through a crack screen, right? Now they do have a virtual keyboard on here, but what a pain. Using the configuration tool, you can set all sorts of cool things. If you look at that, you can see you can set things like drive emulation, using accurate drive emulation. You can make the disk read-only so the Commodore 64 won't write to it. You can also choose which of the control ports you want to use. Now, on the Commodore 64, there were 2 controller ports. If you plugged into one, it was port 1, and you plugged into the other one, it's port 2, and that decided which joystick you could use for the game. In this case, it looks like there's 2 USB ports, but they don't really matter. How you control that is with a configuration file, if you're using port 1 or port 2. And then last but not least, you can set various values for the different buttons, right? So this is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and do a couple of use cases here so you can see exactly how it works and why you might want to do that. So the first thing to do is, of course, copy some games over to your flash drive, plug it in, and you'll get this little flash drive down here. And then I put everything in folders because I'm a little anal like that. So let's take a look at one of my favorite games from Paul Norman called Forbidden Forest. Now, I do not have a configuration file yet, so I am running it stock. So the C64 Mini will default, in my case, because I have a US system, mine will default to NTSC timing versus PAL, let's say. It'll default to port 2. It should default to port 2. And it should use faster drive emulation, right? So it should be nice and fast. You don't have to sit there and wait for the drive to load for 3 minutes. So, but let's try it out. You need to do this with each one of your games as well. So we're going to go ahead and load Forbidden Forest. And you know, the way I've got this plugged into a hub, it might mess everything up. Okay, here we go. So first thing we try, of course, on the crack screen is the fire button. Of course, that doesn't work. So what we need is a space bar. So we're going to hit the menu. We're going to go to the virtual keyboard. We're going to go to the virtual keyboard. We're going to look for a space. And you'll sit there wondering where the space is. In reality, the space is one of the carets. It's the right caret down there. You see that? Looks like a little space bar. And that's it. So let's see if we're right. We are right. So here is the manual that appears on some of these cracks, and it says space to read or run stop to start. So we can sit here and space through and read all about how to play the thing. But if we actually want to do a run start, we again have to use the virtual keyboard to go to run stop, and that works. So now we need space and run stop. So we need 2 keys so far. The traditional trainer, unlimited lives, yes or no. So we need a Y and an N along with our space and run stop. So now we have space, run stop, Y, and N. Oh, go back to that virtual keyboard. Yeah, this is a lot of fun, right? Having to spend all this time in the virtual keyboard. So no, 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 no. Okay. So now we have the difficulty level. So now we need a function key. So space, run stop, Y, and whatever function key we want. So F1, let's say, because we're going to play it on easy, right? All right, cool. So now we have to exit the virtual keyboard. And now if we're right, and this is port 2, then the fire button should work out of the box. Let's see. And it does. Hooray. Now I happen to know inside this game there are no special keys you have to press, like space or whatever. But we do, we could map a space anyway. We could map an enter key or a right shift or a left shift, whatever we want to do. So let's just make sure the game works here real quick, which it should because the fire button worked. Draw my arrow, chase the spider down. All right, we're good. So we know it's port 2, so we don't have to change that. And we know which controller we have to map. Perfect. All right, so this works. All right, so this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to shut down our C64. So you might want to do a handful of these games in advance and write it down on a little piece of paper or something. Each of the keys that you're going to need and the name of the game. All right, so we're going to jump onto my flash drive. It helps if I don't use this stupid screen. Okay, jump onto the flash drive, go to F, and we do indeed see Forbidden Forest is here, and we do not have a config file. So let's go to our web browser, shall we? This is the tool that makes it all happen. Choose File, and we will choose, we'll navigate to our USB drive, and we'll choose Forbidden Forest, right? And it loaded fine, so we don't need accurate drive. It seemed to run the normal speed, so we'll leave that alone. We don't need any weird vertical shift crap. And we're already using joystick port 2, so that is already set as the primary. Perfect. And we are using the C64Mini controller. I do support a couple of other controllers, so if you have like the NX SNES controller, I have a profile for that. My favorite is the Logitech or the F710 wireless, and you'll notice that these key mappings change based on which controller you're using because they have different button sets, right? Pretty cool. So let's take a look. Up should be up, down should be down, left should be left, right should be right. Left fire's good because I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use the joystick with my right hand and push the button with my left. For the right fire, let's go ahead and we'll just leave that alone because we have run stop as the left triangle. The right triangle we have is space. And for A, we are going to change, For A, we are going to change that to, I don't know why the drop downs don't work. We're going to change A to yes. The B button to no. And we'll use the C button to be F1, which is the starting of the game, right? That's it. We're good. So we hit create. It's going to generate the file and push it back down to us using the same name as the D64 file. And so there's already some configs in here, but we're going to go ahead and leave it as Forbidden Forest. Oh, you guys aren't seeing this. How crazy. I don't know what Opera's problem is. Okay, so right now I've got a file dialog box, and I'm going to save Forbidden Forest, the CJM file, right next to the original disk image. So just to prove that that's really there, since you couldn't see that, let's take a look, and you'll see that Forbidden Forest, let's sort by name. Forbidden Forest now has its original disk image, and it has Forbidden Forest as the CJM file. That's the configuration file. So we're good. Let's eject that guy now. Eject. Bloop. All right. We'll take it out. We'll put it back into the C64Mini. We'll fire it back up, and we'll see the results of our handiwork. By the way, you'll see that once you've generated the file, it gives you a link to share. So if we test it and it works great, maybe I want to send this to a friend of mine who also has a C64Mini and say, hey, I've got Forbidden Forest all worked out for you. Here's a link so you can go download the configuration file yourself. You don't have to make it or go through the testing that I had to do. Okay. So we'll launch it once again. This time, no virtual keyboard should be needed. I'm warning you with peace and love. I have too much to do. So let us hope. So as you recall, the first thing we got was the title screen of the crack, which we needed a space, which was mapped to triangle right. Let's see if it works. Boom. So it says space to read or run stop to start. So if we hit triangle right, it's going to hit space for us, and we can read through the documentation. And then run stop, which is the triangle left, should be run stop. Oh, and it is. A is yes, B is no, so we're going to hit B a few times here. B, 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 B. All right, and we said C should be F1. Nice. And fire button to start. Look at that. So what have we done here? We've taken away all of the need to use the virtual keyboard completely. And if there was something funny about this game, like it needed true drive emulation, it needed to be PAL, it needed to be NTSC specific, any of those sorts of things, we could have done that with very, very little trouble to ourselves, right? So let's take a look. Let's go ahead and we'll run through this exercise one more time, a little bit faster this time. So we're going to exit the game. I'm going to go back. Oops, that's not quite what I meant to do. All right. Let's do Mr. Robot and his robot factory. I know there's some funny things about this game, which is why I wanted to do it. So we're going to go ahead and launch that. And again, the same process as before. We need to see what buttons we need. All right, so wow, we're right here on the main screen. There's no crack. There's no nothing. So it's F1. Oops. So it was F1 to play, if I remember right. Let me see here. So I'm hitting the fire button and nothing's going on. So the controller around, so it's showing us some sort of a preview mode of the game here, and fire button's not doing anything. So let me go into the virtual keyboard. Let's see if space will get us back to that screen. No, space doesn't do anything. What about enter? No. All right, so either we're gonna have to wait for it to go back to the screen, or we have to remember what it was that was there. I believe it said F1 was to play. Oh, there we go. F1 to play. F3 for screen, F5 for factory, and pause. So we need to be able to play and pause, right? So for this game, we don't need a Y, we don't need an N, we don't need a space, we just need F1 and F7. So let's make sure that if we're playing that we got the right controller, right? Because right now we're in port 2. So we hit F1, turn off that. Oh, the controller's not working at all. Look. So we know it's not port 2. Which I actually already knew that, but big surprise for everybody else. So port 2 does not work. So we're going to have to do something a little bit different with our next config. We're going to have to designate port 1 be the primary controller. All right, we'll let that run for a second here. Let's go back to our configuration. I'm just going to refresh the whole thing so we start from scratch here. And so we do have to choose the file. We still have to do that. So I'm going to have to turn off the 64, and we'll get back to that. But first things first. We don't need any of these weird settings. All we need to do is make joystick 1 the primary. Up, down, left, right, fire, fire. We can leave these as run, stop, and space. That's fine. But we do need an F1. Oh, we already got one as B. And F7 as C. I'm clever, right? And there was no magic about that. That's just the way that most games seem to need these default settings. So I just use those as the default. So I really don't have to change anything other than setting it as joystick port 1. We verified all of our mappings. We don't need anything crazy. So let me go ahead and shut off the 64, plug the USB drive back in. Our file manager should show that it is indeed there. Oops, stop clicking that. I think I'd learn after doing this a couple of times. Go to M, and there's Mr. Robot and his robot factory. We have no configuration file. Choose file. Go back to, again, I'm sorry you can't see this. M, Mr. Robot and his robot factory. You can see right here. It read it in. And we've already set everything up, so let's create it. It brings up a file dialog, which unfortunately you can't see for whatever reason. Go to M. There are no configurations in here already, so we just hit save as a default. Poof, download complete. Let's verify. There's Mr. Robot and his robot factory CJM file. That's it. All right, so let's eject that guy and we'll try it out. Now, this seems like a lot of work. You're going, oh man, I have to do this for every game. This is ridiculous. You probably don't have to do it for every game. You'll want to do it for most games though, especially the games you truly love and you're going to play. I'll also like to point out that you can buzz through these a lot faster if you're not going through the explanation every single time. I can kick one of these out every couple of minutes, so it's not too bad. All right, so let's try out our Mr. Robot and the Robot Factory. As you remember, B and C are F1 and F7, so that was start and pause. And we didn't really have to change anything else, which is great. Right, back to M's under our USB drive. Mr. Robot and his Robot Factory. Now remember, we also shifted it to port 1, so it should actually play now, right? All right, so F1 should be B. Here we go. Yes, and does the controller work? Oh my god, it works. Fantastic, I love it. All right, cool. You're out the door, buddy. So this is an odd sort of Pac-Man meets Jumpman sort of thing. I think you die if you fall off of this one, no? I forgot how you have to get that guy. You have to jump, but then you die when you hit. Saying, there you go, whatever. Better to lean these guys over and catch that dude. Oh, come on down here. Come on, before it runs out. It's like an Energizer. Oh, dead. Well, who cares? All right, so you get it, right? So you guys got the idea. So now we've managed to kick out 2 different configuration files. We no longer have to touch the virtual keyboard, which is awesome. And again, if we had anything weird like an Electronic Arts game that required a slow disk loader to work, we could do that too, or PAL, NTSC, whatever we want to do. Some of those features, yes, you can do by renaming your file, but you cannot reconfigure your buttons. You cannot map a button to a keyboard command using a file rename. So, hey, this is great. I hope you enjoyed this. Please use this tool. I know that there are guys out there that swear by this thing. We've got almost 6,000 or 7,000, I think, configuration files. And just real quick, if you're looking for one, you can go to the website and you can go to the config files, and anybody who's built one, it'll be in here, right? So let's talk about this real quick. You may not be interested in this at all, but if you are, then let's go ahead and look at it. So we just built Forbidden Forest, and we just built Mr. Robot in his Robot Factory. So if I go to search and type robot, aha, somebody else has been doing it too, right? So Mr. Robot in his Robot Factory has been done several different times. I believe this is probably mine. You could just download somebody else's config file and try it out. Now, again, much like we had to do with Forbidden Forest, you may have to do some trial and error. So even if you do go and grab one from here, all right, so we have Forbidden Forest, and we have a handful of them. So we don't know which one is which, right? Because you know, if you're a big Commodore 64 person, every copy of Forbidden Forest is different. Some are cracked by this group, some have this trainer, some have that trainer, and that might change the way the configuration files work. You can do an MD5 hash, Google it, I'm not going to go through it here, do an MD5 hash of your disk image, and it should match this MD5. Then at least you'll know that you've got a good chance of this config working. But we have like what 6,615 entries, so there's a chance that there's already one in there that works, and maybe it doesn't work. But you know how to do it yourself, so we taught a man to fish instead of giving him a fish. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe. We do all sorts of fun stuff like this on this channel, crazy stuff, VR stuff, PC stuff, Switch stuff, you name it. We anything that's fun, we get in on this. So this was the Commodore 64 Mini and Maxi CJM configuration file tool maker. And you can get to that by going to TheC64Minizone.com. This is free, no sign up, no ads. There's nothing that should bother you, and it works in all browsers. So I hope you enjoyed it. This is Shane R. Monroe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.